Hi, I'm Becket, once again filling in for Professor Curtis Mitch, who's diligently working hard to complete the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible. Today's readings are about family brokenness and family wholeness. In the first reading, we've transitioned from the prophet Amos to the prophet Hosea, both of whom criticized the northern kingdom of Israel, or Samaria. Yet, where Amos criticized hypocritical worship of God, Hosea criticizes the outcome of faithless liturgies, which is idolatry. We can see this same thing happening in our own day and age. People who stop believing in God start believing in anything or nothing. While idolatry today is less about worshiping golden calves and more about worshiping money, work, and the god of the self, in the time of Hosea, God compares his people's idolatry to adultery. But in today's first reading, we hear the lamentation of a family man and his broken family. We hear God lamenting, "When Israel was a child, I loved him. Out of Egypt I called my son," a reference to the Exodus. "The more I called them, the farther they went from me. Yet though I stooped to feed my child, they did not know that I was their healer. My heart is overwhelmed, my pity is stirred." This is the song of the forgiving father whose prodigal son never returns to ask forgiveness. The northern kingdom of Israel never again regained faith in God. They never again offered right sacrifice to God. They never came back to God. They never asked for forgiveness. They never again loved God with all their heart, all their soul, or all their mind, or all their might. Jesus himself testifies to this in John 4, when he tells the woman at the well in Samaria, quote, "You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews." End quote. Now, today's gospel isn't the prodigal son, but we could look at it as the reverse of that story. In the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15, the forgiving father lets his son go and waits for him to return, while at the same time, the older brother in this story remains also in the property, but remains unforgiving and bitter. Today's gospel, also known as the Little Commission in comparison with the Great Commission in Matthew 28, wherein Christ sends out his disciples to evangelize all nations, in this Little Commission, Jesus sends out his 12 apostles to evangelize God's family. Now, unlike the forgiving father who waits for his prodigal son, Christ doesn't wait to forgive. He doesn't wait to reunite his family. Today's gospel portrays Christ as the forgiving family man who sends out messengers with an invitation for his prodigal family members to come home. This is the activity of a family man who is desperate to reunite every family member, desperate with the kind of anguish that Christ exhibits in Matthew 23 and in Luke 19, where he weeps over Jerusalem with the familial words, "How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and yet you were not willing." Yet those of us who come from broken families, especially broken by sin and addiction, we also know that all invitations for reunions are limited by the threshold of rejection. It's the same threshold that divides heaven and hell. Jesus emphasizes this at the end of today's gospel. After telling his apostles to proclaim the good news and perform inherently Christian deeds, he adds that if God's wayward children do not listen to you, shake the dust from your feet. Now, what he means is that your invitation to give meaning to suffering, your invitation for experiencing unconditional love, your invitation to know the love of God and the eternal peace of heaven, your invitation to live a better Christian life is limited by rejection. And when you are rejected, move on. For God will not force his children to love him. He will not force them to be a part of his family if they don't want to be. since he too has limited his awesome power. He's limited, his awesome power by the threshold of human rejection. And this is a warning for each of us too. Don't limit God's power. Don't limit his love in your life. Don't reject him. Go to him, for he's always calling you. He always wants you. He's always inviting you. He's always sending people into your life. And in return, he's sending you into other people's lives with the message, come home, right? Because all of us were sinners. And we're all called, not simply to be called, but to call others. The invitation is extended to us, and we extend it to others, because, as we heard in the first reading, God is mourning for his broken family. That mourning is evidenced by Christ on the cross. He sends people to us all the time. Most of the time it comes in the form of our priests. Listen to them. They are constantly calling us back to the sacraments. We at the St. Paul Center are doing the same, calling each viewer, come back to the sacraments of the Church. The Sacrament of Confession. Dr. Hahn says all the time how he goes weekly. I myself, I try to go weekly also, especially during the COVID-19, because when we were exiled from the Eucharist, many of us were not exiled from the sacrament of reconciliation. We could always go to a priest who could dispense the gifts of the sacrament to us. And I am willing to receive any sacramental grace I can. Those are always invitations to come back and reunite God's family. And it's especially important at the beginning of the month, to go back to the sacrament of reconciliation, to go to the Eucharist all the time. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed being with us here at the St. Paul Center. I encourage you that if you liked this video, hit the like button and the share button, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We constantly pray for you, constantly pray for us. God bless you.